G'day, wrestling mates. Welcome to a very special episode of If You See Kayfabe. As you can see, I'm in the split screen mode. Means I've got an interview. And if the lady in the split screen looks familiar, she was on Dark Side of the Ring in the episode about her late husband. To celebrate the life of her husband, please welcome the widow of Frank Goodish, better known to the world as Bruiser Brody, Mrs Barbara Goodish. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good. Thank you very much. It's like really great to hear the accent.
Yeah, well, that's the funny sort of thing. When I saw your dark side, I thought, hello, that sounds like an Aussie, but you're actually from New Zealand.
New Zealand, lived in Australia, Sydney for 10 years, and then I've been over here since 1978. I, I've lost count of how many years that is now. You lose track.
That's a few years. No, that's all right. Um, so do you actually prefer Barb or Barbara?
It doesn't matter. I allow people what they feel comfortable with. Both names are good for me. I get
Okay,
Barb and I get Barbara, so I just leave it to the individual person.
fair enough. That's all right. Well, Barb always comes across as the more down under thing. Most people sort of say down under for Australia, but you can easily equate that to New Zealand as well.
Oh, yes, when you say "G'day, mate," I still say that occasionally. And
So,
another thing I always say, which I hear from us, is, "Well, it is just lovely to be talking to you, Joe.
oh,
It's a
thank you.
lovely day."
It's a very good day. So, all right. So, how did you meet Frank, who became Bruiser Brody?
Well, I was working in a hotel in Sydney back in the late 1970s,
Hmm.
and it was a hotel that I was really worried about working in, but my friends were working there. It was called the Texas Tavern, which was up there in King's Cross in Sydney, which in the Vietnam days and that, it was not what you call the most safest place to be.
Yeah.
But they told me, they said, "Look, you're being paranoid. Why don't you come for an interview and see how you feel?" Well, I went for the interview. The people were just so nice, and I got the job. And it just so happened it wasn't on the actual King's Cross, it was just a little bit off. But what it was, all the American wrestlers would stay there when they were doing the New Zealand, Australia run, the two territories. They would stay in this hotel. So I kind of became like a big sister to all these guys because of the fact you have to remember back in the 70s, there were no internet. There was nothing like it is today. So
Yeah.
when the boys would come over, they didn't have any way to contact their wives and families because it was just too expensive back in those days to make a long distance call. So they would write the old days when people used to write letters to each other. So
Mm.
they would have their letters and they'd show me pictures of their wives and their families and things because, they were a long way away from home. And when, it gets lonely when you're a long way from home, especially in the 70s. It was a lot different than what it is today.
Hmm.
So it just so happened I made really good friends with a killer, Carl Krupp, who has also passed away now. And he was
Yeah.
just like my big brother. And, you know, and then Frank happened to get the overseas territory, Australia and New Sydney. It was in Sydney was the main base, and New Zealand. So he just happened to be in the hotel. I mean, he must have been there about 3 months. It was just like nothing, just talking away and nothing like that, giving them, saying hello, making them feel comfortable being in a strange country and telling them where to go and things like that. Well, this one night, I usually just worked a 9 to 5 and doing office and a little bit of the front desk. And somebody didn't turn up for the 3 to 11 shift. So they talked me into, well, what are you going to do? It's extra money, back in
Mm.
those days. So I said, well, I'll do it. I don't mind. I'll do the 3 to 11. Instead of leaving at 5, I'll just leave at 11. It's fine. You're young. When you're young, you do a lot of things that we don't do now.
Yeah, pretty much.
So it just so happened all the boys were coming home, and my the boss who owned the hotel was a gentleman from Texas, and he also owned another hotel, it was a restaurant, piano bar called the Bourbon and Beef, which was just up the road a little bit. So I'm getting ready to leave 11 o'clock. I just happened, as I'm getting ready to leave, the boys were pulling up in their cars. They'd finished their match and they were coming back to the hotel. Well, Carl came up and asked me, he said, look, you're still here. Why don't you come up to the Bourbon and Beef and have a drink with us? I said, we're all going up. Don't have to worry. It's everybody's like about 12 of them. And I went, well, you know what you do when you work late. It's not like it's like working at 5 and going and kind of, relaxing for a few minutes. So
Yeah.
I said, oh, well, okay, I'll come up. So I went up there. Frank was part of the party. And it's okay. We're all sitting here talking and everything. Then one by one, they kept leaving. They would leave the table and say, we'll be back. Then it happened again and again. And all of a sudden, there was me, Frank, and Carl. Well, you know what happened next? Carl gets up and leaves.
Oh,
You see, I found out later he worked me. That's how good a worker he was, because he
yeah.
didn't know how to.
And the
She said
plan.
she won't come out with me alone. Maybe she'll feel comfortable. She knows all you guys. Maybe ask her up to the bar and then, guys, just go. So there's only me and her left. So that's how we kind of met. And then we just sat there talking all night. And he was in Sydney for probably 6-7 months after that. He came back to the States once and then came back. But and I always say, with when you're in a situation like that, you're not trying to impress anybody. You're yourself. You're just
Mm.
who you are naturally. When people go out and date, they're trying to impress the other person. So sometimes the real personality doesn't come out. But when you're just friends, it's just you are who you are. And I think
Yeah.
that's what happens. And then one night about he had another match and he came back and he said, I'm going home tomorrow. Sometimes he got into a little trouble with if the promoters weren't doing, he knew how to make money and he knew what worked and what didn't because he did it as a business. He said, I'm going home tomorrow. Oh, okay, bye. Okay, it's nice knowing you, etc. And then what he did, he'd been paid. So he put this wad of money down on the table and he said, I want you to come over. Well, I don't know if you know anything about Frank, but he was one of the most frugal people there were. He was very, very frugal. So for him to put that money down on the table and ask me to come over, I knew right then that he trusted me because I could have just kept the money. Because
Mm.
it was quite a bit of money to pay for an airfare and everything. But there wasn't any promises. All he said was, I'd like you to come over. So, okay, I'm in Australia. I'm wanting to go to England eventually, which is what we do in New Zealand and Australia. That's where we want to end up, another British Commonwealth country. So I went, well, if that doesn't work, because it took me a little bit before I could go over. I couldn't just leave after being in Australia for so long. I had a lot of things to tie up. So I got a airfare and I went from, Sydney, I think it was Sydney, New Zealand, America, London. Because I figured out, well, if it doesn't work out, I've got a ticket to London.
London,
So
yeah, that works out anyway.
yeah, but as you can see, I'm still over here. So I guess even though it didn't work out exactly the way I wanted it to, it did work out, and I'm still over here. So never have gone to London yet. Never got to London.
Oh, yeah, maybe one day, pretty soon.
Maybe one day. Yep.
But you say late 70s, because like Wikipedia has you married by about 72 or 73.
No, we didn't get till 80. 80.
80.
That was
Okay.
80, 79, 80, I think it was. And that was just
Okay.
one of those things. That was just one of those things that he was going to Japan for 6 weeks. So, and his sister and mum and dad his sister lives in Los Angeles, but his mum and dad were staying there for a bit. So he said, well, look, why don't we just stop off at Vegas and get married? And then I'll go to Japan and you can spend the rest of the time, with my family. So that was
Okay.
just it wasn't planned. It wasn't anything like that. It was
Just
just one of those.
one of those
Yeah,
things
well,
do
yeah, we'll go
straight
to
away.
Vegas. You know,
Well,
because
like,
I'd been here a while and everything, so it was, so we went to Vegas, got married. He went to Japan for 6 weeks, and I went and visited family for 6 weeks. We never did get a honeymoon.
oh, crikey. Because, like, with the Bruiser was known very much as a journeyman. He liked to set his own schedule. He liked his Japan tours and other tours as well, because obviously they were lucrative and the schedules weren't as grueling as some of the territories in America.
Yeah, I
So,
think. Go ahead.
yeah, so did he ever consider like a homesteading schedule like in Texas?
Well, he was in Texas. Well, he stayed in Texas quite a bit, but he also went out to the other territories as well because he, as I said, he got in with Fritz von Erich and the von Erichs, and that was kind of how he started off. And then, of course, then after a while, he helped with the booking of the business and everything. And then
Okay.
he still did other territories too when it happened. And then, and as it progressed, especially when Japan was his priority back in that day, because like you said, it was a 6 week tour and it was good. And and as he said, going in Japan, they were treated like so well,
Mm,
and it was a whole different form of work too over there. I mean, this was more real. I only saw one match. The Japanese come over here. I can't remember the years, but well, it was before 1988 anyway. I know that much.
yeah.
And he was working because him and Ric Flair had a lot of good matches.
Yes.
And what it was, the Japanese had come over to film the match. So I got to meet Giant Barber and Mrs. Barber, which was who was in control of the Japanese territory,
Hmm.
and they did that, and people couldn't believe that he could go out and do a 1 hour match with Ric Flair. Now people still talk about that today over here of that match because they just thought of Frank as a rough and tough in and out, beat it up, come out.
Yeah.
Not a wrestler as such, which was in Japan. Japan was more wrestling, like with Ric Flair, that they couldn't believe it that he could go 1 hour with Ric Flair, that he could actually do 1 hour and actually wrestle. And so it was a whole different, and that put him in a different league. And he had some great matches with Ric Flair. In fact, I was talking to somebody. He just happened to be on the phone. It was one of these, like there's a phone thing where you could see each other. I was talking to somebody else, and next second, Ric Flair grabs the phone, and I'm talking to Rick, and he still remembers that match, and he still remembers Frank too. It was very nice. He said some really nice things about Frank.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he did have a overall good reputation. Um, the only the only thing that there was an infamous incident where he stopped cooperating with Lex Luger.
Well, I seen Lex, and Lex took nice too. I saw Lex last year it was, and
Mhm.
I talked to him, and as it was, it's like I said, I know that's another famous match, but what it was, Lex was just starting off in the business, had a match, and of course, what happens when we're young? We're kind of a
Bit
little,
too cocky.
yeah, wasn't going to
Yeah.
mention that, but yeah, we've all gone through it.
Mm,
And so, of course, Lex was young and he was just starting off, looked great, just starting off in the business. Frank, whenever he had a match, even if it was with the new guys, you listen, he knew how to call a match.
hmm.
As you call a match, and he always made the other opponent look good no matter what, because
Yes.
otherwise, what why would anybody want to watch me? I go into a match and beat people up. How boring. you know
Hmm.
I need to make a match. He's trying to make a match. Well, Lex was trying to do his own, and once you do that, that was it. I think Frank kind of just boom, went into another mode. if Lex had listened, and I'm sure I've seen matches when Frank have gone in there with people that shouldn't even, that was smaller than him and everything, but he still made the other person look good. He gave them a few spots to make them look good. He didn't want to just go in there and be the big tough guy. And these poor people are just part of part of that.
Yeah.
He won, plus teaching them too. You know what I mean? Because he had a great mind. That's the one thing I will say. He had a great mind. Why is it that getting on to 37 years, that he is still more popular today than what he was when he passed us in 1988? People remembered his matches, and that's all he wanted to do. He made everybody look good.
Mm.
And with Lex, it didn't quite because, as I said, you
So you
don't
learned
go
from
in
that.
there. Yeah, don't go in there and try to call the match with somebody that knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
And Lex would have been fine. As I said, Frank would have given them quite a few high spots and things like that because that just makes both of them look good, and it makes the people remember the match.
Yes. Yeah. And how, like, obviously when you and Frank Bruiser got together, it was during an era when wrestling was still protected and still seen as legitimate. How soon
Yes.
was it till Frank smartened you up to the business?
Well, it was pretty much. See, I didn't know wrestling. Had no idea. That was not in my in my vision anything to do with wrestling back in those days. And we came over here, and like I said, I've only seen a handful of his matches, but he would come home, especially from some matches when the film started, especially Japan and things like that. He pretty much smartened. You know what I mean? I mean, coming home with scars on his head, he kind of had to smarten me up a little bit,
Okay.
you know. And but like I said, Frank treated it like a business. It was not just wrestling; it was a business to him.
Well, it was his
So
career, his life.
so he didn't lose sight. He only became Bruiser Brody when he left the house and went to the airport. I could actually see it sometimes because we lived out in the country, hill country of San Antonio, and we were a little way from the airport. I'd drive. These were the days where the security wasn't there back in those days. You could drive right up to the door and sit there for as long as you wanted. You weren't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'd sit there and I'd watch him transform. He'd give his son a kiss. He'd give me a kiss. He'd walk through the doors, and even the walk became different. His hair was out. The walk became different. He became Bruiser Brody. Same thing happened when he came back home again. He'd come out of that airport and he would automatically be husband, father. So he knew how to distinguish the two. Sometimes people forget who the real person is and they become the person they create.
Yes.
Well, Frank never did that. He could distinguish the two. And when he was home, he would bring home all the tapes from Japan, or if he could get tapes from anywhere, and he would sit there and watch. He would critique his matches. And
Hmm.
I'd hear him sitting in the lounge room. Oh, I could have done that bit. Oh, that just looks terrible. So he learned from looking at his matches to see what would work and what wouldn't work, to make everybody look good. And like you always said, I just want to give the fans the best night of their life
Yeah.
because they're the ones that are coming paying good money to see me. I don't want them
Hmm.
to go home and think, oh gosh, that was kind of a waste of money. That was, but I don't think many people did that because, like I said, not with the people that remember him and not with the unbelievable when I go to Fan Fest and the unbelievable people that come up to me and these were people that were not even born when he
Mm.
passed.
Yeah.
And they can tell me because of YouTube, because of the internet, they're following him and he's not even here. And they have tattoos. I've had people show me tattoos of him on their bodies.
Mm.
And it's just totally, I mean, to think that this man has been gone for so long and yet he is so remembered by so many people. It's really quite, it's amazing. You know what I mean? I
It
guess it's an
is.
honor, that he actually, he did it. That's what it said, and they do remember him. And I have kids. I go to a gathering in Charlotte every year, and there's a little boy, Mitchell, that he was like just a small boy when I first started going there. Knew Frank, follows Frank. 5 years later, he's in high school and he's taller than me now and still comes. Last time I saw him, he's wearing one of Frank's shirts, you know? So to see these kids, there's a couple of these kids that have followed him since they were just little, and now they're getting to be adults and still keeping
Follow
him,
it. That's
you know?
amazing. Yeah. So, like, with the Dark Side episode, how do you feel that they treated the legacy of Bruiser?
I think they did it very good. Uh, there's a little bit of embellishment because wrestlers are known for a little bit of embellishment, but
Oh,
pretty
absolutely.
much it was pretty much, you know, it was pretty much. I appreciate them. The producer, Evan and Jason, were
Joseph,
just the
yeah.
nicest people. And like you know, it was the pilot of this whole series that is still going on today. So they did the pilot on Frank, and that was either to make it or break it. Because if they didn't like it, that would have only been one episode. And
Hmm.
now, like I said, 4 or 5 years later, they're still doing. So I guess the pilot worked. They were right. But they were the nicest people. They were pretty much just a little older than my son. So he got along. And in fact, that's the only time he's really been in public or been anywhere and actually talked on the dark side of the ring. He's never done anything. I think now he's in his 40s, middle 40s. I think maybe now I can maybe get him to come to some of these events. I think it'd be good to see how people respond to his dad. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? But it kind of brought it home to me. When they asked Jeff, I'm sitting there doing the interview, and then they asked Jeff, you know, would you mind saying a few words? I guess well, sure. Our kid, well, he's not a kid, he's an adult. And when they asked him, you know, what memories do you have of your father? Well, I think he said to the like, well, everybody else has memories, but I don't, because he's hearing all these other people talking about all these memories, and he was only 7 years old when all this happened.
Hmm.
So he really doesn't have any memories of his dad, which is kind of sad. It made me sad when I heard him say that. And I said, yeah, that's true. You because we would be lucky if he would only be home. He worked so much that if you added it all up, it probably wouldn't even come to 3 months a year that he was actually in the house
So
because
you
he was
did?
on the road.
Did you ever go on any of the tours with him?
No, if he was in Texas and it was close by, we would go where he could drive at night. But then he would go to the ring and me and Jeff would go do something, like if it was water there or Corpus Christi or something. So really didn't go into the building. I was at a couple, like I said, the Ric Flair one, it was a big one. A couple of the ones I'd been to, and that's about it. Like I said, I could probably count on my hand how many live wrestling matches I've been to. I've been to
Yeah.
more now, you know, because I go to these fan fests and every year, like it's in St. Louis in May, they have a fan fest over here, and Herb Simmons was a good friend of you know, Frank's, him and Larry Matisak, who's also passed, who I did a book with. I wrote a book with Larry Matisak. He's also passed, and he's been doing every year like a Bruiser Brody Memorial Battle Royal. So
Okay.
they have a battle royal for a cup, and I give the cup out and everything every year to whoever wins the battle royal. So
Hmm.
yeah, Herb has done this every year.
Sort of funny because I interviewed Justin Race, and it's sort of the
Hmm.
opposite where he and his mum nearly went almost everywhere with Harley, and
Oh, I
you're sort of
know.
the opposite.
I know this is the exact opposite. I told you Frank was frugal. He went to make money and bring it home to the family. Which,
Yeah.
as I said, he always said, "Don't worry if you come over. You know, I'll make sure you're okay." Well, even today, like I said, because of these fan fests and because of the merchandise and that, he's still there with me. Yeah,
Yeah,
I know Justin too. I like Justin. He's a great
yeah,
guy. I
he
see him
speaks
at the
very highly of
fan.
you.
And did he tell you the story about Frank?
With the with
About
the knickerbocker pants.
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, that was a we finished off your dad.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, don't. And like Justin said, if Harley was ever fighting Frank, he was not allowed to go to the matches
Yeah, they were
because they knew
pretty
exactly.
brutal. Yes.
Yeah, he knew what it was going to be back because he would tell me stories because he knew Frank too because of being over in Japan with his dad and Frank. So yeah, he told me some stories too about Frank.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to Justin's book. Don't tell your mum. So
Oh yeah,
that's going to be good.
yeah. I think Justin and his mum are going to be in St. Louis when I'm going to be in St. Louis. It's in May, so I'm looking forward to seeing both of them again.
Oh, good, eh? Yeah. No, that was a really. I really enjoyed the interview with Justin. It was really good. Um, just I just because it's a celebration, I only want to touch on the fateful night that happened in Puerto Rico. Before he went there, did he have any concerns that he told you about?
No, no, there was no concerns. No, that was funny because he'd taken some time off, and we'd gone to Six Flags over because it's the school holidays and all
Yep.
this. It was in July, so it's school holidays over here. Different. We're opposite. We're summer, you're winter, winter, we're
Yes.
summer. That was really weird coming over here and the first Christmas because I've always been at the beach at Christmas. That's our nice time. And over here it was like we'd gone up to his parents' house who used to live in Detroit, and it was like I saw Christmas for the first time. There's snow on the ground, there's colored lights, people are going around growling. What is it? Caroling.
Caroling
Yeah, and the thing, and it was like, but this is what you see Christmas as being portrayed as.
on
We only
TV.
knew it. Yeah, we only knew it as the summer, and this was like winter and the snow, and it was like wow, and people singing, and it was something I remember because it was like every picture has the snow and lights,
Yeah.
and you know, so so yeah, we had just he had been home for quite a bit, which was nice before he left for Puerto Rico, and I had talked to him that Saturday and we had made plans to talk on Monday. He was doing a little business. He was looking at wrestling, what, when, to be smart enough to know the things he did. Wrestling wasn't going to be there forever.
Hmm.
He was looking for another way when he couldn't do the things he could. Because he could do things that I can't even do with my body, with his big leg, the way that he did his wrestling and that big leg that he put up and got people in the face. And it's like, how the hell? I can't even put my leg up that far.
Yeah.
And, uh, and we had talked that Saturday, and then we were going to talk on Monday. I had a few things I had to do, and then I do a little bit of business for him and talk on the Monday. So of course, Monday was not the Monday I was expecting.
Yeah.
So, the phone, we always had a understanding. We had talked, so there's no need. We didn't have an answering machine. These are old-fashioned days when you look back. you know, we didn't have an answering machine. We had a phone, just a regular old phone. Well, the phone started ringing and ringing and ringing that night, and I don't know if you know, but in the public eye, sometimes you get a lot of people trying to cause trouble, especially
Yes.
women. You'd get phone calls from women. Well, we knew that understanding that, yeah, there's gonna be a few. So finally, it started falling. It's, about 10 o'clock. And I said, well, I didn't answer the phone because that was our rule. Didn't answer the phone. Kept ringing and ringing and ringing and ringing. Finally, I got mad and picked it up and was going to give
Give an earful.
and and there was a woman on the phone, and then she told me that there had been an accident in Puerto Rico, and I said, oh yeah, yeah, you better come over. Oh yeah, that would be great. I get on a plane and come over. I would really get into trouble. So, being me. I thought, well, I'll check it out. I knew where he was staying, and because she was Carlos's wife, Nancy, who I
Okay.
appreciated. She was a Canadian, and so I thought something just told me, well, yeah, maybe I better check it out just to be sure, you know.
Yeah.
So this is now getting on to what 11:30, 12. So I called the hotel. Well, I guess because of what happened, the hotel put me through to Dutch Mantel's room
Mhm.
because they had gone at the front desk and said if anybody calls, this was because they were there when it happened and everything. They were back in the
Yes.
hotel. Said if anybody calls, put them through to my room. This was Dutch. So they put me through the Dutch's room, and Dutch said, "Yes, there had. I didn't know anything about. Yes, there had been an accident." And I said, "Well, how serious?" He said, "Well, it looks like he might be in hospital for a few days." Didn't say anything what had happened or anything. So then I
Okay.
got off the phone, kind of went into shock, I guess. I went, I know he didn't like hospitals. I said, well, if he has to be in hospital, he probably needs to have somebody there that's going to take, you know what I mean, make sure that everything
Yeah.
is okay.
Yes.
So I grabbed Jeff, found a ticket, called the neighbor, told them. They said, leave Jeff with us. I said, no. If anything's wrong with his dad, he's gonna want to see his son. I just was thinking he was going to be in hospital and make sure the doctors are okay and everything. You know how sometimes you need
Yeah.
somebody to kind of, you know,
Just a
take
reassurance.
care of it. Yeah. So I found a ticket. Didn't have any money. Didn't have a credit card. Well, I had money, but very little.
Yeah.
Frank was frugal. You know, you just left that. And so I looked all around the place, and then I thought, I think I know where he's hidden it. You know, sometimes we know hiding places. So I found it. I went, oh. And then I thought, well, how are they going to take it? It's under, you know, when I get to the airport, it's under Frank's name. Well, it just so happened when I got to the airport, and the guy that was working the desk knew Frank because Frank flew out of that airport all the time.
So it was
So
like,
so
yeah.
when yeah, and then when I explained what happened, he took the credit card and said, "You're fine, you know, that's okay." So really, that's how it all, and then the rest of it's a pretty bad story. After that,
Yeah.
getting there, and of course Abby telling me, you know, being at the airport waiting to get picked up, and Abby going by and kind of letting me know that what happened, you know, and
Yeah.
then everything then after that kind of just went into a blur. But and I had to stay there longer because I didn't want to. Took care of all the business and things, and I figured out I can't leave because if I don't have a death certificate, I can't do anything. There's
Yeah.
nothing you can do with to take care of business without a death certificate. I'm nothing. So I had to wait there till I could pick up a death certificate, and then I left.
Mhm. And do you still keep in contact with Dutch and with Tony Atlas?
Oh yeah, yeah. He's been having a pretty hard time too, but we're all getting
Yeah.
to that age. Yeah, I'm just in contact. Well, it's not that long ago. Yeah, I still keep in contact with Dutch. I sure do. And
Mm.
Abby, I see Abby all the damn time. He's he's always getting on my case
Abdullah
because
the
that's
Butcher.
another thing. It's like he says. I'm like, so he sees me because him and Frank had the best matches too.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Barn
Abby,
burners.
oh yeah, Abby and him. So Abby is always. He said, you don't do enough money because I go and I have a book and there's a figure and everything that I'll take to some of these fan fests and sell. And Abby said, you got to charge more. Last time I was sitting right next to him, we were in the same thing, and it was like he was on my case all the time. I said, Abby, you're Abby. You can charge anything you want, and they're going to pay me. I'm nobody. I mean, they're not going to charge. I mean, I can get a little bit, but they're not going to pay what they're going to pay you, boy. You know.
Yeah.
But it's he always makes me laugh. As I said, he's yeah.
See, this is actually what I like about these sort of interviews because, okay, you interview with a wrestler and you get some great stories. Like I don't know if you know Ken Dunlop in Australia.
Yeah, I've heard that name. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
interviewed him a couple of times because he's Australia's first openly gay wrestler,
Mm-hmm.
and we've chatted a couple of times, and we chat on Facebook, and he's interesting too. But there's a different dynamic by talking to yourself and to Justin, and I'm hoping to chat to a couple of other relatives of relatives like sons or
Yeah.
wives of wrestlers, just to get that background. Because okay, you see Bruiser on TV and you got that image, but you, I think it's only now that we're starting to realise that they go home and they're a human. They're a
Right.
real person. They collect the mail. They mow the lawn. They cook dinner. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much of that Frank did, but but it's it's that sort of thing that's really really interesting to me.
Yeah, because as I said, it's the other side. It's the side that the fans don't see. They just see the wrestler as fact. And you're right, it is. And I've had a couple of people too when I've been in these fan fests, and they're adults now because, as I said, it's now getting on to 37 years. So anybody that even saw him back days, they're all, they're all adults now. And I had this one person came up and he said to me, he said, I'm going to have to tell you an interesting story. He said, I was just a child. I was at the airport and then I saw this monster coming through the airport. And he said, I know, I was so scared that I went behind my dad's, legs. Here's Frank being, and as a kid, if you imagine a kid looking up on someone, something like that,
Yeah.
and Frank had seen this. So Frank came over, bent down, and talked to him. And he
Oh,
remembers that today. He said, it just suddenly shows that you really can't judge a book by its cover. A lot of times we look at somebody and we think they're going to be something else or something that. And then when you get to know that person, they're one of the nicest people you could have because you relate. But sometimes people don't even get a chance to know people because of how they seem. They take it at that first appearance.
mm.
So yeah, he told me he still remembers that it was, what a gentle giant he was. He had a very softly spoken voice.
But on that point about him being so noticeable in the airport, it's actually something that uh, I've heard Jim Ross say that was one of the criteria for having that unique look of if they could turn heads at the airport. And given that, I thought about it in the last few months, and he would have been a good program for Hulk Hogan when Hulk was really hot, and obviously Bruiser was hot then. They could have had a real doozy in WWF. Was there ever any chance of that happening?
Well, there would have been. Him and Stan, like Stan Hansen. Stan Hansen, he's also a good friend that I've been in contact with
Hmm.
forever. And, Stan and Frank were the tag team in Japan
Japan.
for a long time. Well, they're both starting to get a little old. And what was happening was the Road Warriors were starting to come up.
Mm.
And this is when Frank knew that, hey, there's going to be a time, the Road Warriors are going to be. They're the young guns, they're the other ones. So he was already starting to look about life after wrestling. He knew his thing, he knew that everybody wanted to see him and Hulk. I mean, they knew that. That was the match. People would, on one of the Japanese magazines, they had the Hulk and then they had Frank. It's like what to be. You know what I
Mm.
mean? No, they would have. I reckon it would have been a I think it would have been a WrestleMania. It would have sold out a
For
WrestleMania because
sure.
everybody, Beauty and the Beast, everybody wanted to see that match. So
Yeah.
yes, eventually it would happen. That was Frank's ace in the hole. He wanted, but he knew, and you're not kayfabe anymore, but he knew that he would probably have to put Hulk over. So he's waiting it
Yeah.
to the very, you know, he was
Yeah.
smart enough to know business. And he was
Yes.
smart enough to know with me coming in, that's what the finish is going to be. So he was leaving that as his ace in the hole, and it would have happened if the unfortunate accident hadn't have happened.
Mm.
Yes. So yeah, there was. Everybody was waiting for that match. Yep.
How if Puerto Rico did happen the way it happened, how long do you think Frank would have continued wrestling, and what would he have done after wrestling or after in
Well,
ring?
Well, he had already created a company called BAM, Brody Athletic Management LLC. He'd already got that in line. He was already working with a gentleman from the University of Texas in San Antonio. And what they were going to do, we'd already bought a wrestling ring from Joe Blanchard, which was the San Antonio territory.
Yep.
And what they were going to do, this was when, I don't know if you had it over there, was when the DARE program was really big in the States. That was the dangers of alcohol and drugs, and that they would be going around the schools talking to the vulnerable kids, I would say,
Okay.
about the dangers. It was called DARE, it was the DARE program. So what they had decided, they were getting permission from the different authorities and everything, that they were thinking, hey, we get it all approved, we set up the ring, whether it's at a high school or whether it's at a college, and put Frank in there talking about the dangers of drugs and alcohol. You think those kids would have listened? They would have listened. You put someone in authority telling these kids about the dangers. You know how they are. They just shut us out. They don't listen to us when we're
Yeah,
trying
but
to
if it's a
give them
role
good advice.
model,
Yeah, but you put
yeah.
someone that looked as fearsome as that to go out and tell them. We also had a little bit of acreage that had like a little stream going through it, and it had an old mobile home on it. And he was thinking of having, in the school holidays, having like a little, what do you call it? A camp for
Okay.
the the unfortunate, the boys that are growing up in families that don't really have any sort of role model. There's a lot of kids out there that don't have, they're just struggling, that's just making it. Some of them don't have fathers, some of them they're on the streets. And he was thinking, taking them taking them out there, having a camp for the disadvantaged boys.
Oh,
And that would have worked too, because if you know that sometimes a kid, it just takes a person to show that they care, that can change their lives around.
yes.
And Frank would have been the one that could have, here you go, here's this famous guy in San Antonio, big wrestler of that. And here he is. We're spending time, we're camping with him. And he's showing us different things. And it's out there hiking and fishing and, things like that a lot of these kids in the inner city don't get a chance to do. So
Okay.
yeah, we had to see, this is what was it was such a shame that he had all these wonderful plans, and as we know, it was cut short. No, he was already, all this was in the planning stages back then, because he knew his body was breaking down, that there was a time that he wouldn't be able to do what he could do in the ring. So
Mm.
yes, he did have all these plans.
Oh, wow. I didn't know about that because, yeah, when you think about a wrestler, it gets into their bloodstream, and you think, well, when they can't wrestle anymore, they'll book or they'll run a territory. But to hear those other plans, that's amazing. That's tough.
Yeah, and
Eh,
he was starting to help run a little territory too with his friend. I was telling you about Herb Simmons and Larry Matisak, trying to get away and just running little shows and that. So yeah, he was thinking about life after wrestling.
mm. Yeah, you recently caught up with Herb, didn't you? I thought
What
I
was
saw it
that?
on Facebook. I thought I saw you catch up with Herb Simmons on Facebook recently.
Oh yes, I had a podcast. Yeah, I mentioned him in all of the podcasts and everything. And like I said, yeah, Herb's another really, really good friend. because he was the one with Larry that got me with this, making me write this book
Oh,
with Larry. It's Brody, the Triumph and Tragedy of Wrestling's Rebel, with Larry Matisak and me. Larry did the the wrestling side, and I did the personal side.
and where's
So
this
it
book
was.
available?
Rob, I've got it here, but it'd be a bit hard to mail it over
No, no,
to.
but I'm saying if anybody that sees this
Yeah, I've
interview,
got it, but I think,
where can
as I
someone
said,
purchase it?
yeah, I've got a few here, but I think you can get it online too. Being in Australia, that might be the easy. I don't know how much it would cost to send it over to Australia. I can, but it might cost a little bit.
Oh no, I
I
wasn't
don't.
thinking for me, but I was trying to shield for you.
Yeah, no, as I said, probably online. You got all the.
Oh, sorry, you just dropped your sound just dropped out just a bit there.
So yeah.
That's it.
And there's another thing that, I mean, we're in America now, so I'm showing you things from America. This was the last, what do you call it? The
The
last
the action
action
figure.
figure. Yeah, action figure, which is really quite incredible.
That's a really good one. That yeah,
Yeah, it's got all
it's got
that.
liner notes in there too.
Yeah, it's got all sorts of things. I think this is all that's in it. This was you can see it's got what
Yeah,
it's got belts, it's got chains, it's got different hands, but it's such a good,
yeah, it's a
it's
very good
really,
likeness.
I know. And
They
then you
do a good
got,
job of that.
I know. And then that Tony Atlas is a great artist too. You know Tony Atlas?
Yeah, yeah.
Have you seen some of his work?
No, I knew Jerry. I knew Jerry Lawler was a very good cartoonist artist.
Yeah.
I did know that
Yeah.
about Tony.
Yeah. This is some of Tony
Yeah,
Atlas's work.
yeah, Tony. That's very good.
Yeah. And these ones are on the side, so it might be harder to see. He did one with Abby.
Yeah, I
He,
can see
every
that.
time I see Abby, he gives me a fork.
That's his trade.
Yeah, I get a fork. I've got a collection of Abby forks.
Yeah. How's his health these days?
He's surviving.
Yeah.
He's had a few. If you notice that a lot of our old time wrestlers, the same that was with Frank back in the 70s and 80s, they've all had quite a few health problems because their bodies, they kind of just totally destroyed their bodies and everything with all the bumps. And I do a thing in Vegas every year too. It's called the CAC. I don't know if you've heard about it.
Cauliflower Alley Club.
Cauliflower Alley Club. Well, this organization, I volunteer in that too. And this organization, as you know, it's for any of the wrestlers that get into financial troubles. They
Yeah.
have a benevolent committee that they can put a thing in, and they can be sent money, and it can help them a lot because all these people, there were no pensions, there was no medical, there was nothing when
Hmm.
you're doing what they did all their lives and gave their bodies. And now, everybody's having a little bit of a hard time, so that there is an organization that they actually can get a little help out of. So it's a really good organization. And they have one in Vegas. They have a fundraiser in Vegas every single year. So I always go there and I always help out, volunteer and help out because I think it's great. It can really help people.
Yeah. And Bruce is obviously in the Hall of Fame there.
Yep, he got an award there.
That's
He's
good.
not in the big WWE Hall of Fame. He went into the Legends Hall of Fame
Yes.
with Wahoo McDaniels, which is kind of a nothing Hall of Fame. So he didn't
Oh
get the
yeah.
big. He didn't get
Yeah.
the big. We didn't get the ring. We didn't get the nice event or anything. He just went. I didn't even know he was going in. Somebody had said something, and I said, "No, they're kidding." Didn't even know it was already over until I knew that he had gone into the Legends Hall of Fame.
I read about that. Was it ever explained to you why you weren't notified?
No, No, they just do that. They put Wahoo McDaniels in at the same time too. So I'm good friends with Wahoo's widow, Karen McDaniel, and yeah, so yeah, she was not too happy either that both of them at the same year went into this Legends Hall of Fame, which is kind of just as I said, we didn't even know. That
Mm.
was kind of the point. We didn't know, but hey, things happen.
Yeah. Do you think that something like that may get rectified in future now with a new regime?
Who knows? You
Who
know, things
knows?
change. Yeah, no, you're right. Things change. Things can change. We just don't know. You know,
Yeah.
we'll see. But he's got so many other awards from so many other really neat places that, you know, everyone has given him some sort of award, some recognition, so to
Yes.
speak.
Yeah.
You know, which was very, which is an honor that he's been recognized by his peers, and I think that's something too. I think he'd be shocked if he knew everything that was going on, you know, what's going on today, and how he's still, you know, remembered, because I still have people that would like to do a movie too about him. I'm talking, whether it happens or not, you know how these things are, but they're still very interested in doing a movie, because especially now you had the Iron Claw came out, the Von Erich
Yes.
movie.
And there's also now going to be a movie called Queen of the Ring about Mildred Burke.
Yes, there's that one coming out. Yeah, people have been telling me about that one. So now these things, they're bringing out documentary movies on interesting people and interesting subjects. And no, like I said, I've been in talks with people. They're still trying to get it all together and everything. There's been a few little. COVID was kind of the one that kind of pushed a lot of things back.
Yeah.
You know, so no, who knows? Maybe one day there will be. In fact, there was Puerto Rico just put a movie out too, and Frank's portrayed in it. I'd like to see it to see exactly. In fact, the gentleman that portrayed Frank actually called me, and I had a conversation with him. And from what
Okay.
I can gather, they did it. It's only they did it the legends of the rest of the Puerto Rican wrestling. So of course, with him being a legend over there too, they kind of touched on it a little bit. I don't know what, because the whole movie is in is in Spanish.
Spanish. All right.
But he told me that they did okay. The guy that played him told me that it wasn't bad. You know, I thought, well, gosh, that could be really bad how they portray it. But no, he said it was okay. But
It's
it's
sort of
just
funny.
something, yeah. When you're a public eye, you just have to, you know, accept.
But that's the thing. I hear Jim Cornette saying that the hardest thing to portray of the old wrestlers is of the old wrestlers because every one of them is so unique and so much larger than life.
Yes,
Because
definitely.
when you see Young Rock and you see some guy come on and says, "Oh, I'm Ric Flair," and it's like nothing like Ric Flair. And, oh, I'm Steve Austin, and it just looks like some regular guy.
I'm telling you, the one that what the Iron Claw, that was a strange Ric Flair. Did you see the movie at all?
I've been meaning to because I want to see all the inaccuracies because like here in Australia, the only stuff we got until recently was WWE wrestling.
Right.
Everything else I had to look in. I was a voracious reader of the aftermath and so forth, so I knew the Von Erich story, but I the only thing I mainly know is that Chris Von Erich wasn't even mentioned in the
I know.
movie. It's like it didn't exist.
I know. See, the Von Erichs was so much part of Frank's life. I mean, the boys, he was kind of like a mentor to the boys. The boys all looked after him. And Kevin,
Yeah.
I'm going to see Kevin too. I've seen Kevin, and he always talks about Frank. You know, Kevin is the only one left. Yeah,
Yes.
I was kind of shocked that they didn't have Chris in that movie. I thought that was a little. But then when you think about it, it's a movie, but it's not a documentary with fact. It was done. That's what they do when they do these movies. It's not 100%
Yes.
correct, as we
Yeah.
know. But it was funny, the one that played Frank was in that too. You know, he had, you know, because he was part of the office there. So naturally, the thing was, The guy didn't look too bad, but he was short. So
You
being
sure?
short, yeah, because Frank was not short. The guy
No.
looked good. He looked good, but he was short. So, see, this is what I mean. They don't totally portray the exact thing. And when you think, I think the one that played Kevin kind of reminded me more of Carrie.
Kerry, yeah. That part I've seen, and people have commented on that. Because
Yeah,
Kerry was the muscular one.
yeah,
Kevin was more a bit lithe. Yet
yeah.
in the movie, Kevin looked like Kerry.
Yeah, I always say as soon as I saw that, it was like, now that is more to me as Carrie, and even the one that played Carrie was kind of more like Kevin. Is
Yeah,
that right? Whatever. Yeah, it was like, it was just a little, but it's a movie. You know what I mean?
yeah.
It's a
Uh,
movie, so you can't get into it. You know what I mean? They do the best. The one that played Frank in the Puerto Rican one, it wasn't too bad. He was tall, had the long hair and the beard and everything. I always say, and I don't know if you know this one, the one the one movie star that really reminds me of Frank is Jason Momoa. Do you know him at all? Look him up
not.
if you don't know.
Yeah,
He's quite a
definitely.
famous. Yeah, I think he's done things over there too. But he actually even has a scar in his eyebrows. Frank has a scar that goes through because one of the cuts kind of had a little accident, came all the way down and just about got his eye. It didn't, thank goodness, but he has a
Uh,
scar. And this Jason Momoa has a scar in his eyebrow, just like what Frank
yeah.
is.
Well,
And
that
he's
part of the
big.
eyebrow is very easy to bust open.
Yeah, yeah, it
You
was
can,
like boom.
you can actually do that one hard way very easily.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so we'll see. As you said, day by day, we'll see what happens. But as I said, with me doing this podcast too, it shows he's still around. He's still part, even though 30, to me, 37 years being gone, and yet he is still talked about. I cannot go in Facebook, and every day I see a picture of him on Facebook. So it's like
Yeah,
every day it's like his presence is still here.
but that there, although everything's sad, that part about how he's fondly remembered, that's sort of warming to the heart for you, though. Yes.
It is. No, I have to admit that. It is. It's very that he left a legacy. And he talked about that so much about wanting to give the best to the people. Well, for him still being remembered today, he did give the best to the people. So, Frank, you are still remembered. Unbelievable. But
We
like in
thank
Japan,
you
what they
for that.
call him, the intelligent monster or something, because he all he was doing was reading, reading the Wall Street Journal or reading, things that not that people would expect for him to do. They'd expect him to be out in the bars. And every time when he packed to go on the road, I had to put cans of green beans and cans of tuna in his bag. And that's what he ate. He wasn't going to go out to the restaurants and drink beer after the show. I told you he's frugal. So
Frugal,
he would
yes.
open up, he had his protein, he had the green beans, and he would eat his can of tuna and green beans. And that was his meal after. And he used to work out in the rooms or go to the gym. And then when there wasn't a gym, he would find all these exercises that he would do in the room. So he did it as a business. He wanted to be successful. And I
Hmm.
think, well, I think he was.
Yes. Well, he was. He was. All right. It's been a really, really good chat. Very interesting
Good.
stories. Um, so what I'd like to say, Barbara, is thanks for your time today.
No,
And
it worked out perfect. 3:30 was even more perfect than anything. Thank
yeah.
you.
Well, I'm about to change tops, get into my worktop, and go to work.
Ah, what do you do?
I'm a courier,
Ah, meet interesting people.
pretty much, but at the moment more mechanics because I deliver European car parts.
Okay.
All right. So everyone, thank you to Barbara Goodish for her time, and remembering the life of Bruiser Brody. This is Southern Joe, your wrestling mate from down under, saying hooroo.
No, that was
And
fine.
say ta-ta for now.
Yeah. That's what I remember. If I say that, people look at me. We're not recording now, are we?
I just started the recording again because you wanted to say ta-ta for now.
Did you get my? He was
I missed it.
well,
That's why go.
I just want to say ta-ta for now.